Elise de Clorance. After you were crowned queen, you were envious of your people's worth and ability, harboring evil intentions. You committed a monstrous crime. You have been sentenced to death by fire. Dr. Song Ji-hyun awakens from a nightmare where she was set ablaze. Only this nightmare was reality, a reality in a far distant past and a different life. She's on flight to Germany until turbulence hits, and the captain announces to everyone that the plane has taken damage and can no longer sustain flight. Everyone is in fear as they must descend for an emergency landing. The rudders explode and the people scream in panic as the plane descends. The screams intensify with people begging someone to help, but no one can come for them on this crashing plane. And all Dr. Song can think of is, am I gonna die here? This time, I wanted to be sure I lived a life with no regrets. No, more than anything, I plan to save so many more. Dr. Song was incredibly skilled, taking on surgeries and performing feats that others simply could not reach. Known by her peers as the kind-hearted surgeon queen, and also having doctors' handwriting so bad no one else could make it out. But her skill set should never be taken lightly, as she's always in the know about the latest medical technology and has never failed a single surgery. Even when getting introduced to newer, experienced doctors, they praise in awe at meeting the surgeon queen. She really enjoys sweets too, as she doesn't indulge in any vices like drinking or smoking. We only have one life, and this time, in this life, she wanted to live earnestly and face everything with sincerity. After dinner with her friends, Dr. Song was greeted by a young girl who was ecstatic to meet her. She thanked the doctor for saving her mother during a pancreatic surgery that everyone said was impossible to do. As the young girl began taking her leave, she mentioned her mother had told her and her father she loved them dearly, and the words love lit up Dr. Song's eyes in a sad way, because she's never said those words or had anyone say them to her. Because in her past life, the one she loved didn't love her back. Even worse, the man she loved announced in front of the people that as punishment for her crimes as Elise de Clorance, the evil empress of Britia, she was to receive death by burning. But now, leading her second life as Song Ji-hyun, this time things will be different. After dinner, she begins packing for her trip to Germany, and when she spots a book on medical terminology, she gets nostalgic, remembering the times she was bullied for being an orphan. She didn't get the chance to experience love by a parent in this life, but she wasn't going to let the loneliness get her down. She had brought misery to everyone in her first life, but to atone for all the sins she committed as Elise de Clorance, she became a doctor and saved as many lives as she could, and brought happiness to as many people as she could. She was proud of herself and happy for having chosen to live this way. But sometimes she wondered if her family was here, would they be happy to see her this way? Despite the wicked person she was, her family was always kind to her. Her father, her mother, and her two older brothers. She still missed them dearly, even in this new life. Awakening from the plane crash, it seems she survived, but her eyes stared in horror at the lifeless passengers. Despite this, she steeled her resolve and went to her medical supplies. She then hears a boy cry out over his passed out mother and runs over to check on them, promising to save his mother from dying. She successfully patches up the mother, but then she hears a man aching in pain and sees a metal pipe lodged inside of him. She doesn't have a blade handy, so she cleanses some broken glass nearby and surgically repairs the man's abdomen. She then sees the sight of rescue helicopters arriving. Looks like everyone is going to survive, except she isn't, as the blood begins to pour out from below her waist, and we see a trail following her every step. It's no good. She's not gonna make it. Song falls out of the plane, wishing she could have seen her family one more time. Oh man, it looks like Palace has escaped his cage again. Wait, what's he doing here? This familiar place. A maid then comes in to tell the girl that, as of today, she's no longer confined to her room. As the girl stands silent, the maid asks, "Lady Elise?" And the girl stood in shock, seeing her face in the mirror. She was once again Elise de Clorance? Elise then asks the maid Mary if her family is at the dinner table right now, and they are. She doesn't know why this happened, but her mother, her father, her brothers Chris and Len, she was in tears over how desperately she missed them. After telling her family how much she loved and missed them, they stared at her in visible shock. Her mother scolded the father for punishing her too severely. Her brother Chris consoled her, telling Elise that a lady awaiting her betrothal shouldn't cry in front of others. Upon hearing about her engagement, she had something to say, but her father cuts her off, telling her that her engagement to Crown Prince Linden de Romanoff will be formally announced at the Emperor's birthday celebration. However, Her eldest brother Len protests Elise even being a good match for the prince, realizing it's insolent of him to question the decision that their emperor has made, but he truly opposes their betrothal. Elise smiles because hearing Len's sharp tongue is nostalgic, but she agrees with this statement, as her first life was full of regrets because of her own actions. But it was her selfishness that caused the crown prince so much misfortune. She must ensure the same mistakes don't happen again. Recollecting all the events that lead to her demise, she recounts that her brother, Chris, dies in the Kusef campaign. Their stepmother, Emily, dies of illness. Then the rebellion of the House of Treston. For the crime of protecting Empress Elise, her father and brother Len are then executed, and with that, the House of Clorance is extinguished. The initial expeditionary force to Kusef dies of an unknown contagious disease, with an estimated fatality count of 47,000 people. Emperor Minchester de Romanoff dies of a chronic illness. Then after the Kusef War, an epidemic spreads eastward with an estimated fatality of 70,000 people. Elise sighed because medical science isn't advanced in this era, yet so many problems come from illnesses. However, she cheers up when her maid Mary brings in some dessert. Mary gets a little flustered because she's never heard Lady Elise thank her, causing Elise to remember the wicked villainess that she was before, who got angry over the tiniest of things. And after she and her Prince Linden ascended the throne, she became the worst possible empress, until 10 years later, she was burned at the stake. Mary then suddenly breaks the tea kettle, and in trying to pick up the fragments, she cuts her finger. Elise examines it, and with a glimmering smile, tells Mary it'll be alright as long as they rinse the wound in water. And after that, she needs to wrap it in clean cloth in a way that'll keep the wound closed, demonstrating all the knowledge she gained during her life as a doctor. Mary thanked her with tears in her eyes, grateful to see her mistress care so much about her. And this reminded Elise of the young girl whose mother she saved. Now she is certain that she wants to live in this world as a doctor, but to do that, she knows tomorrow is going to be a battle. She presents herself in front of Emperor Minchester, who is happy to see her again, with his first guard, Bent, standing beside him. As the king chattered, Elise was reminded of how kind their emperor was, even back when she was a terrible person, and yet he would die right in front of her due to what she now knows as diabetes, leaving her with the final words saying she should become a good and praiseworthy empress. The emperor notices Elise's demeanor to be different somehow, so she nervously sips tea, hoping not to give away she's somehow lived a whole nother life. Sir Bent, however, thinks she's just nervous with the emperor's birthday coming around. She grabs her dress because she knows she needs to say something about his illness. However, Prince Linden, the only man she's ever loved, arrives at the tea party. He takes a seat, glances at her, then looks away. Elise remembers once being in love with his brusqueness as well, but when she tried to serve him, he would only dismiss her, saying he only married her under his father's orders, nothing more. However, she had never given up. She had been determined to get him to love her. Now looking back, she felt stupid for trying to force things. Linden apologizes for his late arrival, as his discussion with the Ministry of Finance over the Kusef campaign budget ran long. Elise expressed some concern about the expedition, so the king wanted to know her thoughts. From her past life, she knows the campaign will fail, a failure resulting in a war where her brother Chris loses his life. She wonders if she should tell them because she doesn't want to look suspicious. But with the idea of Chris dying again, shaking her to her core, she explains there is a worst case scenario where the kingdom of Moncel from the east will join in on the enemy's side. Elise breaks down a really long explanation about how their empire will get ambushed by some guerrilla warfare. And the king is shocked that not only does Elise understand battle tactics, but she's also got a firm grasp on the relations in other countries. He finds her counsel impressive, but feels exhausted because lately he tires easily and feels ill. She learns that he's got all the symptoms. Tired even after long periods of sleep, feeling thirsty no matter how much he drinks. The urge to urinate often wakes him up. She's now certain the disease he died from was diabetes. The emperor questions how she knows so much about what ails him, and she answers that she once read it in a medical text, that these sickly conditions were caused by high concentration of sugar in the blood. The emperor takes her input and will bring it to his personal doctor, Viscount Venn, which makes Elise glad because she's confident in the Viscount to figure it out. So now that that issue has been solved, she now has to deal with Linden. She announces to everyone at the table she would like to annul her engagement to Prince Linden. Her father gets up, confused at what is happening, but the Emperor has him hold it, as he wants to know what has changed, since Elise was the one who wished more than anything to be engaged to his son. She then responds that being the crowned princess, she would become the first lady of the empire and an important ruler. She feels too inexperienced and unfit for the position. Elise then gets on her knees, begging for forgiveness for desiring more than she deserves, bowing, ready to accept any punishment they would deal her. But the king has her raise her head, and for her to tell him the real reason. So she answers that she wants to be a doctor, showing a determined look in her eyes. The king felt her desire, especially thinking when she demonstrated her knowledge of the medical text from earlier. So he decides to make a wager with her. If she passes the exams and becomes a doctor, proving her work as a doctor is more valuable than her existence as the empress, then she can choose whatever path she desires. But if she can't prove herself, then she must put all her thoughts and energy towards becoming their future empress. She has until she comes of age, the next 6 months. It's a difficult gamble, but she's willing to take it on, something that no one was expecting. Afterwards, the Emperor has Elise and Linden take a stroll through the garden, since it's been so long since they've seen each other. As they walk, Linden asks why she took on such a gambit, as being a doctor is highly specialized and even with a noble rank, she'd be given no special treatment during the exams. However, Elise is aware and refuses to give up. Linden stares at her, shining, with her saying she's ready to give it her all to save as many lives as possible. And this even surprises and flusters him a bit. Elise then apologizes for everything, especially for always causing him trouble. Ever since they were small, she had forced him into an engagement he never wanted, but he simply answered, "Who said that I didn't want this engagement?" Which is something she wasn't expecting to hear, staring at him face to face. Back with the Emperor, Duke Clorance apologizes for his daughter's behavior, but the Emperor tells him there's no need to apologize. She's matured so wonderfully, it's even surprised him. We turn back to Elise, still apologizing for everything, saying she won't get in his way anymore, and she knows that he hates her. However, he just looks at the petal on her head, taking it off and walking away without a word. She could tell he was angry, but she knew this time, walking a different path would be the best for the both of them. She wants Linden's life to be a happy one, because he's the one she loves the most. The next day, Elise is assigned to the Teresa Hospital owned by her family. She'll be working under a doctor named Graham, the youngest instructor who's also considered a genius. Elise will also go by Rose, so she won't be recognized as the Duke's daughter, but instead as a student who is recommended by a Viscount. Her father asks why she's hiding the fact that she's from their family, but she knows if they learn she's from the Clorance family, she'll be given special treatment. Chris isn't too happy with his younger sister being assigned to a relief hospital for the poor, so he'll be sneaking in from time to see how she is, but she tells both Chris and her father not to worry. Just like you shouldn't worry about missing my videos if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Here at My Shoujo Weekly, you'll find plenty of other villainous anime like this one. If that's something you like, I can for sure handle. You don't need a medical degree to subscribe to my channel. Eventually, she arrives at Teresa Hospital, knowing she must earn her license as quickly as possible and win this wager against the Emperor. We hear Graham de Fallon, annoyed for having to work with the young Rose. If she's even 1 minute late for their 10 o'clock appointment, he plans to toss her out. She arrives right on time, and Graham immediately judges her as she has the appearance of a typical noblewoman. Graham then begins evaluating her resume. She's not old enough to have graduated from the academy, so how has she been studying medicine? She explains she's self-taught, which makes Graham chuckle over hearing such a ridiculous statement, just furthering his annoyment because if this weren't a request from Viscount Kate, he'd throw her out right now. He questions her on the purpose of healing arts and what she would do if a patient lost their life while undergoing treatment. She confidently answers, being a doctor is about treating and curing patients. Then, with her eyes closed solemnly, she tells them she'd carve their death into her heart. This gets Dr. Graham's eyes to widen. To him, it's as if she's a doctor who's faced patients' deaths many times. He then takes her to work with patients who have severe illnesses and no family left. This is a ward where patients who are beyond the primary hospital's aid stay in. Elise then asks if she'll be treating their underlying conditions or alleviating their symptoms through conservative treatments, surprising Dr. Graham again because she's asking the perfect questions. He wonders if it's just coincidence. He leaves her to her own devices and thinks it might be cruel to place her there, but if she's going to quit anyway, it's better to make her realize it sooner thinking she'll only last a few days at most. The people in the ward stare in awe at Elise because she looks just like a little princess. She begins cleaning the ward as better hygiene can reduce overall mortality. So she continues to clean and mop up the place. The maids even start to help as no one has ever cleaned this ward before. But afterwards, we see it sparkling clean. We then take notice of a man groaning in pain. He had suffered injury from falling off of a roof he was fixing. Elise decides to lay him over for examination and notices he's been lying down so long he's developed bed sores. Elise tells the maids to take him to the treatment room because if he's left like this, his back may get infected and that would lead to blood poisoning. She then asks for a disinfectant solution, anesthetic, and a scalpel, and the maids are shocked to hear Elise is going to perform surgery. Elise suits up, knowing Dr. Graham will probably scold her later, but she can't stand aside while a patient's condition is worsening. With the skill set from her life as Dr. Song Ji-hyun, the surgery queen, she removes the patient's dead skin with ease and completes a successful surgery. The next day, everyone cheers at the recovery the injured man has made. He tears up a little because he was just so happy at how he was treated. Whenever he showed any anxiety, Miss Rose would always reassure him it was gonna be alright. She tells him she didn't do anything special. That's just what any doctor should do. The men then all begin fighting over who Elise is going to treat next, so she tries to calm them down because she's going to treat them all. Over at the Emperor's palace, Sir Bent is getting pissed because Viscount Ven has no idea how to treat the Emperor's worsening conditions. Prince Linden mentions Elise's words about the symptoms of diabetes. This leaves Ven perplexed. There was a small presentation given in another nation with fewer than 20 people who know about this disease, so they send Ven off to research more detail. Afterwards, the Emperor asks his son how the Kusef campaign is going. Linden reports that what Elise had mentioned before was right, and that a third enemy nation, Moncel, seemed to be preparing for an ambush against them, which was verified by their intelligence bureau. The Emperor then sighs with relief, knowing Elise has saved their empire. The head doctor is pissed at Graham because he left Rose to independent study when she was referred by Viscount Kate. He then gets ordered to go watch after her and heads to the ward begrudgingly. However, he's surprised to find it sparkling, his mind blown, wondering if he came to the wrong room. He tries to wake Rose up, but the happy patients tell Graham not to because she's been working so hard she hasn't slept. Even the maids think of her as so admirable. She cleaned, she examined, and her treatments were to perfection. However, upon hearing the word treatment, Elise began to wake up to a pretty angry Dr. Graham, now knowing she was in for a scolding. Dr. Graham checked the first patient, surprised to find on his back the buildup of fluid and pus gone, with the opening of the wound completely clean. Elise reported the severe bed sores the patient had developed, and with the risk of infection, she excised the necrotic tissue. With complete skepticism, Graham asked which doctors helped her, but she confirms it was a solo job. This makes him laugh, causing her to sadden a little at his lack of belief. However, the patient confirms she did his operation on her own. So, Dr. Graham decides to test Rose. He asks the name of this patient's illness. She answers bacterial pneumonia, given the viscous phlegm and increasing inflammation that was found during the exam. And upon hearing her answer, he simply has her return to her ward. Graham sat at his desk, pondering everything. He deliberately had Rose examine patients with difficult cases, but somehow she answered correctly every time, like a veteran doctor. He kept wondering how this young girl who had never attended the academy came off as so experienced. Is she perhaps a genius? The patients she looked after were all abandoned by the hospital, but were now happy and getting healthier by the day. Graham had wondered if he had been in her place, would he have been able to do what she did? No. Is there any doctor in the world who could do what she did? He actually smiled, looking at the joy she brought. He then invites her to a little creek. He's ready to admit defeat. He apologizes to Rose for allowing his own prejudices to see her as a nuisance. He completely judged her appearance. He holds out his hand for her to shake and blushes, while letting her know this is to seal their vow as teacher and student. And with that, the two vow to work together to save lives. Back in his office, Viscount Ven confirms the symptoms Emperor Minchester mentioned, confirming the illness to 100% be diabetes. This left him to ponder, however, which doctor would have mentioned this. He had asked many of the brightest from the Imperial Cross Hospital, but not a single one of them had referenced His Majesty's illness. Knowing whoever mentioned the information to the Emperor must be brilliant, Ven gets frustrated wondering who it is. Back in the Emperor's quarters, Prince Linden delivers the news that Ven is preparing his father's treatment. The Emperor is grateful to Elise, Now, it's not just the country she's saved, but also his life as well. He feels if Lady Elise were to become Empress, Britia Empire would surely be secured under her leadership, but is conflicted because if she has the talent for medicine, would it be better for her to be a doctor? Emperor Minchester then commands his son to go inspect the Pierre territory, where Teresa Hospital is. That way, he can ascertain how Elise is doing with his own eyes. Dr. Graham introduces Rose to his apprentice doctors. They're astonished to see such a young noblewoman here working at the hospital. With Graham having to go to a meeting, he leaves Hans in charge of showing her around. But Hans feels nervous about her, misjudging Rose as a girl who might faint at the sight of blood. Hans shows her around until a nurse comes to them, saying there's a patient in need. It's a man with chest pains who is having trouble breathing. Hans orders a nurse to bring an electric cardiac defibrillator and Dr. Graham. However, Elise knows this is the wrong call. There's no time to run tests on his heart. He'll die before Graham even arrives. Elise gloves up and gets a stethoscope. Examining the patient, she notices the sound of breathing on his left side growing weaker. His jugular vein was overly swollen with blood. This is definitely tension pneumothorax. Too much air is escaping into his chest and putting pressure on the heart, causing the man to go into shock. Elise then has the assistants bring disinfectant solution and an injection needle. After wiping down the man's chest, she pierces it with the needle to alleviate the pent-up air pressure. And with that, the man is finally able to breathe, leaving Hans shocked out of his mind over what he just saw. Graham makes it in to hear Elise's explanation. Air was escaping the patient's thoracic cavity, putting pressure on his lungs and heart, so she used the needle to release the trapped air. And with that, Graham understood exactly the treatment she was going for. He congratulated Rose, as tension pneumothorax could have led to death if it was not treated immediately. Hans was only surprised even more because he knew Dr. Graham was famous for never complimenting anyone. The rest of the doctors behind Graham were impressed as well, excited to pick Rose's brain, and this only confirmed to Graham that she is a true genius. Everyone in the hospital began speaking in hushed whispers about Rose, the young noblewoman who looks like she was raised in a beautiful, happy, sheltered life, but was somehow able to perform difficult procedures that saved the lives of others. But regardless, Elise couldn't ignore a patient right in front of her. Even Hans is boasting about it to his peers, blushing when his friend mentions he's smitten over Rose and her talents. He even suggests Hans ask her out to the festival. Hans agrees to the idea since, with the festival only happening once a year, it wouldn't seem weird for him to take her out. On second thought, he doesn't feel he's a good match for her sparkling aura at all. But who wouldn't fall for her after watching her skill and resolve? After hearing Rose's report on dealing with a patient who dislocated their arm, he thinks of her not only as a genius in medical arts, but someone who's mastered them. I mean, it's as if she was reincarnated with the skills of a god-tier doctor from another world. Even Graham catches himself in a daze, distracted from his thoughts of Rose. They hear cheers outside, and Dr. Graham remembers today is the day of the festival. It only happens once a year, so it's something everyone in town goes to enjoy. He tells Rose she should enjoy it instead of working any overtime, and she responds by thanking him and giving him a warm smile, which causes Graham to blush and look away. A nurse then suddenly barges in to tell them a patient was just admitted with a serious injury. Before them is a patient named Randall with a serious bullet wound. Graham tells Randall's friend saving him will be difficult, since the bullet passed through his spleen. He then apologizes because there's nothing he can do to save him. Completely distraught, Randall's friend then pulls out the crest of the Imperial family, demanding any method to be used to save his friend. However, Graham only looks down with remorse, because there is no method in the entire empire for treating a pierced spleen. As Graham begins to decline again, Elise interjects, saying they will take on the task. The blonde man stares in shock seeing her here, because it's secretly Prince Linden in disguise. While visiting the town where the festival was going on, Linden's guard Randall noticed Linden seemed unrested lately. However, it's not just lately. Linden has felt unrested for the last 15 years, since the death of his mother. He used his imperial magic to disguise himself. They toured the festival to get a good inspection of the town. They then headed down a dark alleyway, as it was the fastest method to reach Teresa Hospital, until a robber came threatening them to hand over their belongings. The robber went in for a strike, but Randall disarmed him with a single stroke. However, Randall wasn't prepared for the gun that the assailant had in case. Linden is shocked to hear Elise is so adamant to handle Randall's injury, since she just came to the hospital. Graham tells her it isn't possible with how severe the wound is. But again, She's confident, telling him they'll just remove his spleen. Then it came to Graham. There'd be no need to stop the bleeding within the spleen if they just remove it and tie off the blood vessels. They can stop the hemorrhaging. Such a simple idea, yet no one has ever done it before. To Graham, the idea is revolutionary. Graham asks her who should perform this, since it's beyond even his current skills. But both him and Linden are flabbergasted to hear Rose, the newbie apprentice, desire to take on a surgery this difficult. But she's confident that she'll save Randall. They need a third assistant, however, and with everyone else busy, Linden offers to help. As Linden watches Elise perform the surgery, he remembered when his father first announced his engagement to her. For the longest time, he thought that he didn't care about who he was engaged to, but seeing how she is now, could he be falling for her? The surgery ended in success. Linden, under the alias of Ron, thanked Elise for saving Randall. He then began to get up to take his leave, but Elise noticed he was pale, so she wanted to check on his temperature, but he pulled away, getting flustered, making excuses for why he couldn't get checked. He eventually ended up bringing Randall home to recover. Back at the hospital, Elise handed over her report from the surgery, and Graham was surprised at how bad her handwriting was. Viscount Ben got a hold of the report, excited to explain the miraculous, never-before-seen splenectomy. However, the head doctor from Teresa Hospital in front of him disregards it as a lie, saying the surgery simply isn't possible. But Viscount Ben claps back because this very surgery was done at the hospital the head doctor is from, leaving him to believe it must have been Graham who performed it. One of the nurses comes in, as Graham has been called for by the director to explain Randall's surgery, so he takes Elise with him as they head to the director's office. While sifting through books, Linden falls and Len luckily is there to catch him. Len suggests that if the prince is unwell, he should go visit the hospital, but when the prince responds there's no need to because it's just mild dizziness, he remembers Elise saying it could be a symptom of something else. When Graham and Elise enter the director's office, she notices Viscount Ben. However, when the director dismisses her as a new assistant, Ben thinks nothing more than the girl looks familiar. Not good for Elise. Ben has been performing her medical exams since she was little, but he thinks it's not possible for the wicked Villainess to ever become a doctor's apprentice, and just chalks up the resemblance to Elise as uncanny. Ben then asks Graham how he performed the surgery. However, he of course gives all the credit to Rose. The director grows tired of hearing such a fabricated story, since she's in this world completely new to medicine. But she confirms the claims, saying she's always wanted to become a doctor. She studied the basis of modern medicine in this era, and her excuse for how she knew the surgery would work was that she had always been searching for better treatment methods. But of course, she can't tell them she was a god-level doctor in a previous life. The director asks if she came up with the splenectomy procedure all on her own. She did, and she even explains exactly what happened and how to do the surgery. The director still can't believe what he's hearing. This is preposterous. However, Viscount Ben is more than ecstatic, even offering her to come work with him at the Imperial Cross Hospital. After all, he just wants to see her techniques in person. The Imperial Cross Hospital is the Empire's greatest medical institution. However, to work there, she'll need to pass a medical examination, which Emperor Minchester is having Ben bump up the difficulty this year. The director thinks there's no way she'd pass. However, Graham believes she will. He thinks of Rose as a true genius who possesses greater abilities than any doctor he's ever met. He's even willing to humble himself and say that she's better than him. So with that and Rose's confidence, she's able to get letters of recommendation from the three of them to take the medical exams. While divining the hospital, Elise thinks back to when her engagement was announced at the Emperor's birthday. Back then, this villainess believed a happy future awaited her, but the person she loved never loved her in return. She had never seen Linden smile once. But this time, her announcement won't happen since she's chosen a different path. Ron comes to visit, and the two lock eyes, staring silently for a bit. He at first says he didn't come for any reason and tries to walk off, but Elise stops him, knowing he came back for the treatment she suggested. In her office, she asks probing questions to determine what ails him. He at first thinks he's wasting his time, since the doctor at the Imperial Cross couldn't even determine his ailment. She then suddenly grabs his hand to check his temperature, and that's certainly making his face red hot. She notices his hand is a little cold, so she decides to check his neck next, not making the situation of his heart any better. He wonders if she's like this with her other patients. She then determines that he has subacute thyroiditis. The thyroid is where thyroid hormone, which regulates our body's fuel, is created. When the gland is inflamed, it'll produce less of the temperature regulating hormone, but it's easily solvable by just taking some medicine. But even with him taking it, she'll need him to return in 3 days, and for him to visit regularly over the next 2 months. That way she can check his condition and adjust dosages if needed. So they periodically meet for Ron's treatments, until their final visit, where she tells him he's all good now, and he almost looks disappointed that he's done being sick, since he won't be seeing her anymore. However, while working in his office, feeling better than ever, he looks out his window and heads to the hospital back in his Ron disguise to find excuses to hang around Elise. After all, he can't tell her directly that he just wanted to see her face. He helps carry her water bucket and offers to help clean the hospital. However, he's never cleaned before in his life, so she offers to teach him. They get close, scrubbing together. When they finish, Elise thanks him for all the help, and she catches his heart again. He's a little saddened to hear her call him Ron, but is now just discovering how beautiful her smile is. That night, back in Linden's office, Len asks where he's been going lately, leaving the mountain of accumulated work behind. But all Linden wants to know is what Elise likes, as he wants to show her his gratitude. So Len explains she likes strawberry cake, mango pudding, banana tarts, hates milk, but that's not what the prince was looking for at all. He wants to give her something worth gifting to a lady, but I thought treats were pretty good. Linden quickly figures out this conversation is going nowhere, since Len is someone who's always serious about working, until Lin suggests jewels, as his sister has always liked dazzly, gaudy things. But even so, for some reason, how she currently is, Linden can't imagine her liking jewels the same way. He tries presenting a jewel to her, but she says no thank you. He tries telling her it's a gift for saving Randall the other day. However, she can't accept it as she only did what a doctor should do. But Ron still feels he cannot rest easy until he's repaid his debt to her. But Elise feels the medical fee was enough. However, Lin was right. She wants strawberry cake, except her family won't let her eat it too often. Then, Linden mentions she likes mango pudding, banana tarts, and that she hates milk, but she wonders how he knows that. Linden just smiles, telling her from now on, she'll let her eat as much as she wants. From the bottom of his heart, he wants to bring joy to this woman he's fallen for. At the palace, the Emperor asks the director about how Rose fares at the hospital, and the director confirms beyond a shadow of a doubt she's a genius, as if she were born to become a doctor. The director then takes his leave. Sir Bent expresses that no matter what, Elise must become the Empress and serve the Empire. He was the one who suggested the medical exam's difficulty be raised to make it hard for her to pass. He also suggests the Emperor announce Elise's engagement to Linden at his party, even though the Emperor had promised to wait for their wager to finish. But Bent has an important plan to enact, as we see Elise cheerfully working at the Teresa Hospital. Oh man, what's Sir Bent scheming? Will the prince tell Elise he actually likes her? Or could Graham win her heart? Find out next time by subscribing to my channel. But for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.